Hello and welcome to The Public Good. This is Deja James from Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites over 365 organizations working to build a better Buffalo. We're delighted to join you every Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. on 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 AM. You can also watch full video of every show on our YouTube page. Follow PPG Buffalo on Facebook and Instagram for more information on how to access video and full podcast of our show. And of course, you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. Check it out. I have finished the spiel, so back to what we come here for, our guests. So I'm very excited today to be joined by Brandon Williamson, founder of Pure Ink Poetry and Pure Ink Poetry Slam, Steve Peraza from Cornell ILR School, Senior Research, and Sam Magavern, the founder of the Calamus Project. And you're all here to promote an event that's happening for the Calamus Project, Whitman on Walls, this Thursday, November 16th at 7 p.m. at the Burchfield Penney Art Center. And I'll let you guys explain a little bit more about what that's going to be. But I do also want to unpack who is Walt Whitman, which is what this is all about for our listeners, and the medium of poetry for our listeners as well. So we'll get into all of that and hopefully be able to cover all of that in 27 minutes. But first, I want you all to be able to introduce yourselves for yourselves. So I don't know who wants to go first, but...
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Williamson. I am the host and founder of Pure Ink Poetry. We host poetry events and slams all throughout the city of Buffalo. We travel internationally. We travel nationally. We compete in regional slams. And ultimately, one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit today is also the element of slam and spoken word when it comes to poetry itself. So I look forward to having that conversation.
Fun. Steve?
I'm Steve Peraza, Senior Research and Policy Associate at Cornell ILR Buffalo Co-Lab. And in this instance, I am a poet, maybe a rapper, or a rapper, maybe a poet. I'm not really sure. I guess we'll talk about that later.
I think we will.
All right, and I'm Sam Magavern. I'm Senior Policy Fellow here at PPG, and one of the people who started the Calamus Project, which is a project to bring Walt Whitman's poems to new audiences.
Wonderful. So we're talking about bringing Walt Whitman to new audiences. Who is Walt Whitman for most who probably do not know?
So Walt Whitman was a great American poet in the 19th century, and he wrote a poem called Song of Myself as his most famous poem. And the Whitman on Walls program that we're going to be talking about is bringing that poem to life through these 7 films that a theater company made, and then our 7 local poets each respond to one of those films. So he was a great poet. He more or less invented like modern poetry. It would be a strong claim, but kind of true. So he was the first great poet in the English language to say you could make poems that didn't rhyme, that didn't have regular meter, and that incorporated all this different material. So he was very radical. He was queer before that word was used the way we would use it now. He was a profoundly anti-slavery poet, radical Democrat, and a fascinating guy.
No, that's really cool. And for context for everybody, I think I looked it up earlier, and he lived between like 1807 and 1871. So for him to be all of those things during that time period, anti-slavery, during the height of the tail end of slavery, all of those different things, is really interesting. And I do want to say that I acknowledge that Walt Whitman is, for me to speak plainly, because I don't know how else to speak, is a white man, right? And so I think a lot of people do see poetry as, or even literature in general, as kind of like these classics of these white greats, because that's kind of who's been put up in all of the like mausoleums and different like places where we memorialize these great works. But as I looked more into it, because honestly, I hadn't really interacted with Whitman before you all came to me and pitched this project, and I did a little bit more research on him. And I found it a very interesting what you were doing with his works, because it was almost as if who he was lent itself to more modern sensibilities in a time where, I mean, you wouldn't even have thought the way we thought at all today. So I think that's really, really interesting. But wondering like what your response is to kind of that idea of like white classics and how Whitman kind of is a little bit different than that typical model.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously what you're thinking of is absolutely true. And in a sense of when you look at the world of whether it's the world of academia and those who were in power, who were able to tell you what is valuable and what is not. In most cases, they would say, oh, this was written by this type of person. Therefore, this style of poetry is now more valuable than anything else. But I would tell you this poetry's been around well before then.
Yeah.
In a variety of different cultures. In fact, even coming up in Black culture, like poetry has been an element of storytelling. It's been how we kind of leave our legacy both in the past and how you learn and teach lessons in the future as well. So it was just up until a certain point when people started to recognize that poetry. And when it comes to Whitman, yes, the benefit, the privilege that he had was he was a white man. Right. And all of these other things kind of were able to come together, and he was able to tell even more of a story within his words and with his poetry because he had the ear and the eyes of those in power at the time. So it's a powerful tool that you can use for advocacy. It's a tool that you can use for getting your story and your voice out. But at the same time, this kind of goes to what I was going to talk about when it came to slam and spoken word and things like that. The purpose of us doing poetry slams the way that we do them is to take the power out of the hands of, those in power, take it out of the hands of academia, those who say, oh, this is valuable, this isn't, and put it into the hands of the people. And that goes with not only just those who are, I kind of like this and I don't like that. You have a different group of people every single time you perform. And they're the ones who determine on this particular day what is good and what's not, or not what's good and what's not, but you get the idea. So that was kind of why things like slam was invented, because we weren't being heard before. You go back to like beat poetry and people did poetry on the streets, and then it transitioned into hip hop and everything like that. But even still, you still needed the ear of or the eyes of someone else to be able to push your work forward. And so this was an opportunity for poets to say, you know what? We're going to take that entire equation out. Any slam that you ever go to is judged by 5 completely random people in the audience. No matter whether it's on a local level all the way to national to international. It's usually just 5 random people who are there. And they're obviously encouraged by the crowd and so on and so forth. So I go on my soapbox about slam because of exposure. Walt Whitman was we were exposed to Walt Whitman to a point where we can learn about what Walt was talking about. And then from there, it can become a conversation piece that opens the door for so many other people.
That's really amazing. I mean, the fact of, especially how you highlighted slam of making that accessibility factor of poetry and an art, right? Because I think also art is just something that's kind of been safeguarded in a way and kind of gatekept, exactly is the word I was looking for. And so making it accessible in that way. And like you mentioned, hip hop, I think that is the whole point of hip hop is like, we're doing something our way in a unique sound. And it can be valuable as art as well. And now look at it today and where it's come. Because we're speaking on it about 50th year of hip hop as well. So I think that's really cool to kind of tie that in. But Steve, I actually want to highlight you right now because you're kind of on the hip hop side of the poetry thing. And so for you, how do you feel about different forms of poetry, not just slam that Brandon has highlighted, but maybe other ideas of poetry that maybe people think are more accessible to them? Because I think some listeners feel like poetry isn't something that they interact with on a day-to-day.
I mean, admittedly, I felt that way. Sam Magavern, thank you for the opportunity. Sam brought into the poets Leaves of Grass, which was one of the Walt Whitman texts. I think ours was published in 1860. And just sitting with the tome felt like, oh man, the distance between myself and now. A lot of what I did in response to Walt Whitman's poetry was to say, you know what, I do want meter, I do want rhyme, I do want music. I don't feel like you, Walt Whitman. I mean, I think the first versions were like, this is what I'm gonna do. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because hip hop has that culture and aesthetic, right? After sitting with it a little bit, I came to realize that like there are levels to poetry, right? And it's a literary form, but it's also a performative thing. And you traverse that boundary when you're doing this work, right? And something that's written in text has its own value. And then what we're gonna do, which is really bringing the text to life in response to other stuff, really kind of changes, I think, as an artist, what I think I'm doing. You know, I thought I was doing a rap, but right now I feel like it's a little bit more art. It's a little bit more, and that's okay. That doesn't change its essence. It's just that the more you kind of give into the cultural and the artistic creativity, like the creative process, the more you connect with the work. So in terms of like rap, like I expect to rap and I'm gonna go up there and rap and you know, like I'm 16 years old again, right? You know, this is a little weird too because like I'm, you know, Cornell ILR, like oh God, here we are. You were talking about like this kind of unspoken schism between the people and the scholars, you know, but here we are, right? I mean, Sam is like one of the top scholars of Walt Whitman, like, you know, like top 5 guys there, right? And then we're just trying to bring that into, you know, to bring that scholarship to the people, that literary creativity and development. Yeah, I'm gonna land the plane now.
No, I think that was all together. Yeah, go ahead.
I say the goal is to build the bridge.
Right.
To, you know, make something that, you know, I know a lot of people are not exposed to Whitman. I wasn't until Sam actually brought the Calamus Project to Ujima.
Yeah.
I'm the president of the Ujima Theatre Company. We partnered and we worked together, and that was my first real introduction to Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
And so having that exposure and then recreating and then writing to a response to is a way that exposed me to, okay, this is something I need to look deeper into. But if you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. And so as you get exposed to something, there's a saying that, like they say, what is it? When you know better, you do better. And when you are exposed to something like this, then it can open your mind to new possibilities. So our goal is to build bridges to those who may not have been exposed, even those in the poetry community who might not feel like they have access to it. Our writing is our bridge that we're building to the people.
And Sam, I'm interested in asking this question to you because we've all kind of said how Whitman wasn't something we had naturally gravitated to or heard about before. And so it seems like you're the catalyst to say, I see there's a gap here in Whitman's work and who it really could touch and affect, right? And so what really was that inspiration for you to say, I need to bring this to community through the Calamus Project?
Yeah, I was reading his poetry a couple of years ago, and I was so struck by how directly it speaks to today, even though it was written a long time ago. And some of his work, you know, we started with these Calamus poems, which talk about same-sex love in a way that was so ahead of its time, and it's still, you know, reads so fresh today. You know, other of his work too, like Song of Myself, that we'll be featuring at this event, it just speaks, you know, it's about democracy, it's about love, it's about inclusivity, it's about a lot of things that we still need to hear about today, and just, you know, delivered very beautifully in this great rhythmic language. And one of the things I like about what we're doing on Thursday night is we've got songs, so we've got Curtis Lavelle and Louis Montijo performing 2 songs that Curtis created from Walt Whitman poems. Really beautiful. We've got spoken word poetry, we've got film, we've got rap. So we're bringing a lot of different art forms together. But, you know, poetry started off as sung. You know, in pretty much every culture, the first poems were sung. They weren't spoken. And then, you know, if they were spoken, they were chanted, they were performed, like slam poetry or performance poetry. So, you know, what Brandon and Steve do is like the most traditional kind of poetry. At the same time, it's the most modern. And Walt Whitman's kind of in the middle. You know, he was really radical in his time for saying you don't need to use rhyme and meter. But, you know, he's part of this tradition that starts with song and chanting and, you know, is always coming back to it.
No, I think that's so interesting that in the time that he's in, he's grappling with things like democracy, things we talk about all the time now, like, is this really a democracy? Like, can democracy really be representative of all people if all people aren't really equal in the United States of America? All of those different things. And for him, in his position of power that you kind of mentioned, of him being a white man and being able to kind of use that privilege and mobility to be able to question the system and maybe not get killed or something or radical of the time that actually still happens today. But it's really interesting to me for him to be grappling with that, especially in the time period he's in, because it really is in this time where, you know, the North versus the South and the Union versus but at the same time, those debates are happening, but it's still only for a certain type of people. And so he's able to kind of bring up, well, what about someone like me or someone like the slave or someone like, and I think that that's really interesting. And like you said, really ahead of its time. So I was really struck by it. And when I started reading reference material and different things to have this conversation about, I see why Sam loves this so much and why he wants to bring it to all of us now, because I don't think as a Black woman, I would have naturally gravitated to a book with Whitman's face on it to identify with myself. I don't think I would have did that. But when I challenged myself to do that, I was very surprised on how much I reflected into the work. So I just want to also encourage listeners. I don't know if you both feel that way too, but
let me just sidebar the Calamus Project.
Yeah,
is lit. Like you got Naila Ansari dancing, the poetry being read, the performance on that is amazing. I remember from last year when it was introduced. That's some good stuff.
Yeah,
like up to date right now stuff.
No, I mean, I was just watching some of the videos you all had on your website, and I was like, wow, this is really impactful. So
Brandon has some beautiful performances.
Calamusproject.org.
Yeah. Look for Brandon's face on the poems, and you'll hear some great performances.
No, I love the kind of spread of representation you have and kind of the reciting of some of the poems, and just the performance that each individual puts into it really changes the way because I was reading some of them before I went to your website and looked at the video, and it completely changed the way I digested it. So definitely suggest people, if they have the time or make time, to be honest with you, to watch that. But I want to give you both the opportunity, if you want to recite a little something now, give the folks a little teaser or understanding of what kind of your style is and what they can expect from some stuff.
All right, fine. I wrote this. This is my favorite rap to recite.
Okay.
I wrote it in 2004. So a couple of the references are dated, but it's my thing. It's my jam. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to survive off minimum wages. Never made a lie for a $5.35. That couldn't even get me high. One Nick, no Dutch to roll up and light. But this be broke economics. Make a house, a toilet, a lounge out of trees. Go to the park to spark after the dark, cause the seed getting smart, she know the smell of the reefer. She know that daddy never happy neither, till after that split, eyes all reddish. She make connections, plus all the time in your hands, make you wonder if you should go back to the grams. Move a G-Pack in 3 flat, back 7 times, feed your fam 7 times to make it relative. Forget calling your relatives, $1,500 a day. Hooray for the booty, buy for the crew, A. Life gets sweet when it's not about the light, gas and red meat. But in the broke zone, when you're broken alone, broken home, can't dial out, broken cellular phone, feel like you sell your soul for free meals a week worth, stomach off track like reverb. Can't go to the store with an oath from God. Can't pay him in hymns. Can't win with a grin. Like the only thing they don't bill's oxygen. Not yet. Maybe 2076. To testify 300 years Americanness, you can no longer breathe without American Express. If you was broke, homie, imagine that. The consumer society turned to living and dying, B. Or living from buying, dying from misfortune. Better said dying, because you miss fortunes.
Big snap.
I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me spit that. I'm sweating now.
That's what it takes. That's what it takes. The energy. I love it.
Appreciate you guys.
Everybody's staring at me. Okay. I guess sure. I'm gonna do a poem. So one thing that I've never been able to do. I don't have the discipline to work to a meter, and to like the way that he does that. I don't have the mental discipline to do that. I don't have the attention span, and so that's why I chose poetry. Because you don't have to. I can go down that path, but like to be able to do that is just always dope. First, there was the word. Through the reverb of a big bang, the word was spoken through sacred syllables, and that word became poem. A poem developed the eyes and became, or developed, the poem developed the heart and became a promise. A promise developed eyes and became perception, and perception spoke up and became opinion. Opinion stood up and became foundation. Dig deep. Bury your poem in your foundation and watch it bloom into the most beautiful poetry, ashe. We breathe in its peace offerings. Shalom. Have you ever considered the lifespan of a poem? How this poem died a long time ago, but I am now preaching its eulogy, and so on and so forth. So I'm only giving a small taste of it, but I'm going to go deeper into that. Yeah, another time.
Gosh. I'm sorry. It takes you a while to digest like every line. I love poetry because even in the short lines, you can digest that for at least a few hours in itself, right? And so my brain is just working overtime. I gotta like get back into host mode. I'm sorry. You guys blew me away just now, like thinking about my response to that, what I related to in it and everything like that. So I hope our listeners also feel that way. I know that's just a little taste of Women on Walls on Thursday, and kind of you're gonna have both of you there, but you're also gonna have some other poets as well. But what is your goal for this specific event, and especially in you highlighting local artists to participate?
Yeah, it's going to be a really dynamic night. We've got these great films that theater company, Compagnia de Colombari, made of Whitman, but then we have 7 amazing poets, these 2, 5 others. We've got the poet laureate, Jillian Hainsworth, who's going to be there, 4 other really talented poets. So it's going to be something no one's ever seen before. You know, it's music, it's film, it's poetry wrapped up into this ball. So yeah, we just want to share it with people. It's free. It's absolutely free. It's in a beautiful place. It's in the Burchfield Penney Auditorium. We're going to have a little reception afterwards, so folks will have a chance to actually talk to the artists and learn more about their work. So yeah, it's going to be a magic evening.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah.
We've had a great time just building up to it as well. Yeah. The process, I've gotten some, people don't know, but I've gotten some footage of the process for what we've been able to do. We've come together, we watched the videos, we were able to talk in depth about it. And imagine, like you're talking to us right now, but imagine being in a room full of poets who are just like, just trying to break down every single thing. And they're like, oh man, think about, and I mean, it can go for hours.
You got to rein it in.
You got to reel it in. You got to reel it in.
Yeah.
And we've been practicing, we've been training, I've been coaching, and I've been meeting with them one-on-one starting since yesterday as well. And we're getting ready to put on a show in a variety of different styles of performance. And that's the thing. So you have some who are going to sing, do some singing. We got some rap. We have JB, who's going to be a straight powerhouse. Jillian is just Jillian. Jillian's going to do what Jillian does. Yeah. And it's a wide variety of different styles that we're going to have on the stage. So you're not going to get the same thing over and over again with every response to a poem. And that's what we're excited about, is you really have to come out and see it to get the full experience.
No, this is amazing.
I'm excited. I'm just happy to be here. You know what I mean? To your point, Brandon. I mean, you hop in the room with the artists, and I was in awe. There's real levels to a lot of craftsmanship that goes into it. And JB is gonna be dope. I've been saying that every time JB says something, I think it's hot. So it's gonna be great.
No, that's so exciting, and it really introduces people to, because there's a very large local scene, which I recently discovered. I think post-pandemic, I started going to some of the public poetry events that happened, which there's a ton of that I didn't know about. So we've had a couple of different poetry groups and different things on the show so far, but I think this project is very interesting because of its goal of accessibility, and I think a lot of the other projects are also trying to be accessible as well, but it's this is the core mission of this specific project, and letting people grapple with these large overarching themes, but in their own way, right? And so being able to see you as artists digest things differently with your different styles and approaches and personalities, I think lends itself to people being able to interact with the work and find their similarities in each one of you to be able to then digest this larger idea. So I think that's really awesome what you all are doing. I think it's very inspirational. And I think it's great. I want to end, if I can end, on a large overarching question, because I love doing that when we have 3 to 4 minutes left of a show. But I'm just wondering, each of you seem like you have your own personal connection to poetry and what it means for you in your life. And so if you could summarize something like that, about how this really has affected you and how this really supports you in this journey called life.
I mean, for me, it's, I've always written to explore. And so in this opportunity, I get to explore a way of communicating that is, is really distinct from my normal. We know each other from childcare work and PPG and policy advancement. And in this sense, I don't really see this as fully separated. I actually see this as a variety, another way of communicating really vital information. So if I can do it in this form, I'll be a stronger research and policy associate for it. So I see this as a major privilege and advantage.
Wonderful.
So I grew up with a theater background, and often when it came to theater, you're often telling someone else's story. You're playing a different character, you get a chance to like tell someone's story, but when it comes to poetry, especially spoken word, you get a chance to tell your own story in your own words. And there's another saying that we say in the poetry community, which is don't restate the obvious and expect me to call it genius. So in a sense, you have to have a purpose behind why you're telling your story, or else why are we listening in the first place? So it allows us to kind of converge all of these thoughts into something concise, but something that we can still have fun with and you can still dive into it creatively. And when I do that, my goal, as I've mentioned before, is building bridges to make connections, to expose people to different either thoughts or different things that pop up in my poems that might change perspectives. And that's my goal when I write.
Ooh, I love this.
Poetry, it's beautiful words, it's entertaining words, it's dramatic words, and it's words that go deep. And, Whitman went incredibly deep for years and years working on his poetry. He wanted to absolutely change the way people thought, the way they acted, the way they related to each other, the way they loved each other. And we've got, 7 Buffalo poets who are going deep too. So it's going to be a great night.
No, I love that. I love the local element to it so that we can know we have local talent here. We don't have to leave. It's not all about the transplants. No offense. Shout out. But thank you all so much for being here. This is so exciting. I'm excited to also attend this event. So I hope some listeners will have some time Thursday evening, 7 o'clock at the Burchfield Penney Art Center. Thank you all for being here. This is Deja James with Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, uniting over 365 organizations working to build a better Buffalo. Join us next week where we'll be talking about Black maternal health and the new doula program that is now state funded to accept Medicaid. It's the Public Good, Tuesdays at 10:30 a.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 a.m.